Do you not get about using the royal family in order to enrich personally?
He's not using, that's his name. He's the son of the king. He's using no one. I'm British.
Then call it harryandmeghan.com. Don't use Sussex. That's part of their title.
Isn't it the case that on the way out of the royal family, they did give them a kicking? And therefore, why would you then want to be royal or
because
seen as
why
royal?
can you not be a royal and actually criticise the monarchy? Why not?
What do you
why
think?
can't you do that? That doesn't make them any less royal. He is the king's son, and I am sick of headlines of this, articles like this, absolutely bashing Harry and Meghan. They are legally and by birthright, he is
take away the
Duke
titles
of Sussex. Why would you?
Because they're just cashing in on it.
Well, at least they're making their own money. At least they're making their own money.
Off the back of an institution that you and I pay for.
It's not on the back. But we're not paying for them.
We wouldn't care
for William and Kate. That's who we pay for.
Can I get a word in there?
Go on, James.
We would not care two figs unless they were part of the royal family. They're part of the royal family. They left it. So leave it behind. If you're that good, go off and use your own blooming name. Seriously, it's
appalling. Is his name. That is his name. Deal with it, James.
Sussex,
the whole
given
of,
by
all
the
these
nation.
people who bash Harry and Meghan, you know what? Deal with it. He is the son of the king. He's entitled to use his name, and
so
he will.
He
and they are doing it for
accordingly.
good. Of York uses it all the time. Sarah Ferguson uses her title.
Well, then maybe that's wrong. Maybe that's wrong. I don't know.
But in my view, they're having their cake and eating it in the sense that they're using their royal name in order to make sure that, particularly in America, they get the currency, they get the money, they get the deals because of what they...
Or the alternative royal family that the younger generation need and want. They are...
So you would say... Okay, this is going to sound crazy, but let us say Charles stepped back. Obvious thing is it goes to William. But if you could reshuffle... You would take it to Harry, would you?
Good King Harry, yes, I would.
Harry.
I think,
and Queen Meghan.
I'm sure William will do a great job, but I do think that for the younger generations, Harry and Meghan are the alternative, and they look to them.
It was one of those electrifying mornings on the Jeremy Vine show, the kind where the air in the studio feels charged before a single word is spoken, as if, the universe itself is bracing for a reckoning. You could sense it in the uneasy way the production assistants adjusted the microphones. You could feel it in the stiff smiles exchanged between panelists. And most of all, you could hear it in the silence. That sharp, anticipatory kind of silence that wraps itself around everything, where every breath feels like a held note, every glance heavy with meaning. Jeremy Vine, sitting at the helm with his cue cards trembling slightly in his hands, though whether from caffeine, nerves, or the weight of what was about to unfold, no one could say, cleared his throat and introduced the topic. Prince Harry and Meghan Sussex. Again. Yes, again. Because in this media landscape, their names aren't just buzzwords. They're battle cries. They're dog whistles. They're lightning rods. And yet, this wasn't going to be another rinse-and-repeat tabloid echo chamber. Something deeper was in the air. The debate was set to cut into the marrow of modern Britain. On one side of the table sat James Max, the epitome of buttoned-up performative British stoicism, the kind of man who says keep calm and carry on without irony, who worships at the altar of tradition no matter how decayed the altar has become. And on the other side, there was Narinder Kaur, blazing with clarity, with conviction, with the kind of unapologetic truth-telling that refuses to be trimmed to fit into sanitized daytime TV soundbites. When these two collided, it wasn't just a clash of opinion. It was a collision between eras. James Max wasted no time. His disdain oozed from his voice before the words even landed. He didn't offer analysis or critique. He issued a command, the kind designed to shut down conversation entirely. Harry and Meghan should just bore off. That smug little phrase, as pompous as it was dismissive, wasn't just an insult. It was a summation of an entire worldview. Bore off, he said, like he was swatting away a mosquito, as if the couple's decision to live authentically, to speak openly about mental health, race, trauma, love, and institutional betrayal was somehow tedious to him. Not dangerous, not disrespectful, just boring. That was the giveaway. Because it wasn't their actions that irked him, it was their refusal to disappear, their insistence on remaining visible, on writing their own narrative, on existing outside the suffocating expectations of monarchy. That was the threat. Max doubled down with the usual antiquated arguments that the Sussexes were commercializing their titles, profiting from pain, obsessed with attention. He spoke like someone whose script hadn't been updated since the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. You could almost hear the nostalgic violins playing in the background as he talked, a yearning for the days when royals were quiet, docile, mostly male, and almost always white. For James Max, the issue wasn't Harry and Meghan's behavior, it was their very existence, their refusal to shrink, their decision to be both royal and real, to reject a life of ornamental silence in favor of something riskier and more authentic. That was what made him bristle. That was what made him say bore off. Because to people like him, truth-tellers are only tolerated if they whisper, and Harry and Meghan dared to speak clearly. But Narinder Kaur wasn't having it. The moment she leaned forward in her chair, the atmosphere shifted. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't grandstand. She simply stated what many had felt for years, but hadn't yet heard spoken aloud on national TV. Harry and Meghan are the new monarchs for a new generation. And just like that, the conversation left the orbit of gossip and entered the realm of revolution. Because what Narinder was talking about wasn't scandal, it was symbolism. She wasn't defending two individuals, she was redefining monarchy itself. Her words were calm, but her intent was seismic. She pointed out the glaring hypocrisies, how it's perfectly acceptable for the royal family to live off taxpayer money, to cut ribbons, pose for portraits, and sell oat biscuits under Duchy originals. But the moment Meghan Sussex offers handmade jam in a gift box, it becomes a national crisis. She asks the uncomfortable questions the establishment refuses to face. Why is the public so enraged by a black woman earning an honest living but not by the wealth hoarded in palaces built on colonial exploitation? Why is Harry's desire to protect his wife from the same fate as his mother seen as a weakness? Why is Meghan's honesty treated as a betrayal while silence is rewarded? And the beauty of Narinder's dismantling of James Max wasn't just in her facts, it was in her framing. She didn't engage in petty rebuttals. She reframed the very foundation of the debate. She asked with unwavering clarity why we are still centering the comfort of institutions over the safety of individuals, why the royal family's brand must remain pristine even when the cost is a human being's mental health, why silence is seen as duty and truth as disloyalty. These weren't rhetorical questions, they were indictments, and Max, for all his smugness, had no real answer. He tried, of course, he trotted out the tired line. They said they wanted privacy, but they won't shut up. A line as overused as it is intellectually lazy. But Narinder didn't flinch. Privacy, she said, doesn't mean invisibility. It means autonomy. Boom. That's the difference the media refuses to acknowledge. Harry and Meghan weren't asking to vanish. They were asking to control their story, to speak on their own terms, and that, to a media machine used to owning the narrative, is the ultimate rebellion. Narinder then did something even bolder. She zoomed out. She connected the Sussexes' experience to a larger cultural reckoning. She spoke of how younger generations, across Britain and around the world, are increasingly disillusioned with institutions that promise stability but deliver harm. How they crave authenticity, not spectacle. Vulnerability, not perfection. She explained that Harry and Meghan weren't anomalies. They were mirrors, reflecting back to us a monarchy that refuses to evolve, a press that punishes truth, and a public too often conditioned to mistake cruelty for tradition. Max, by now clearly out of steam, resorted to mockery. He rolled his eyes. He interrupted. He tried to reduce Narinder's arguments to emotionalism, but what he failed to grasp, and what viewers felt in real time, is that Narinder's passion was her evidence. Her fury was the point. Because how else should one respond to institutional gaslighting, to racial scapegoating, to generational trauma passed off as heritage? She reminded viewers that Meghan's so-called grifting was no different than Charles's duchy empire, or the royal warrants slapped on tea tins and gin bottles. The only difference? Meghan didn't wait for institutional approval. She didn't ask for royal favor. She built her own table and invited others to sit. And you know, in a world where power is often hoarded and inherited, that act, that simple, audacious act, is honestly revolutionary. Narinder's monologue was more than a defense of Harry and Meghan. It was a call to conscience, a reminder that the true danger to the monarchy isn't scandal. It's irrelevance. It's the growing recognition that symbolic crowns offer little in the face of real human suffering, that polished pageantry can't paper over centuries of harm, that a palace can't protect you from yourself. And as she delivered this truth, slowly, deliberately, and without apology, it became clear that she wasn't just speaking to Max, she was speaking to Britain. And Britain listened. The clip went viral, not because it was controversial, but because it was clarifying. It cut through the noise. It sliced through the coded language, the whispered racism, the tabloid dogma. It said what so many had been aching to hear, that Harry and Meghan weren't the problem. They were the proof. Proof that truth is more powerful than tradition, that love can triumph over lineage, that being royal means nothing if you lose your humanity in the process. So yes, James Max said, bore off. But what he really meant was, I'm scared. Scared of change. Scared of people who don't ask permission to matter. Scared of a world where privilege isn't enough to command respect. And that fear, so thinly veiled in sarcasm, so poorly disguised in punditry, was laid bare for all to see by Narinder Kaur's piercing clarity. By the end of the segment, Max wasn't just out-argued. He was outpaced by history. Narinder had redefined the debate. She had wrestled it away from the tabloids and planted it firmly in the soil of justice, accountability, and truth. And in doing so, she reminded us all of something vital, that change doesn't come quietly. It comes with fire, with courage, with people like Harry and Meghan, and voices like Narinder's, daring to say what needs to be said, even when the room isn't ready to hear it. And maybe that's why, despite all the noise, Harry and Meghan remain at the center of every conversation. Because deep down, we know the monarchy is at a crossroads. And whether we admit it or not, we're all watching to see who leads us forward. Not with a title, but with truth.